the whole 640-mile race, which is avoiding all the other boats that are jockeying for position, trying to keep the crew fairly calm and hoping that everything's been covered.
Ben, where do they stand as far as making trial runs to the starting line goes? There's no prohibition on that?
No, well, some of them would have done that and timed themselves from a known point that they figure out, or there's various ways. The big boats tend to get back and just time the start. The little ones will hover on the line and just sort of go when the gun goes, because they can accelerate with their light weights. But the big ones really need a bit of a run up to it to get the best out of it. They probably will all pile up one end of the line, which is a bit dangerous, but we'll have to wait and see about that. Which would be the favoured end of the line today? Well, to my way of thinking, I think up near the starter's boat. It must be terribly hard to manoeuvre. Some of those maxis, like Lion, we can see there, to try and get in position and not run into some of the smaller boats. They're much harder to manoeuvre, aren't they? Yes, and the vision is not too hot from the back where you steer the boat. The man on the pulpit at the bow is calling the skipper up and down and away, and sometimes it gets a bit hectic because the fellow steering the boat misreads the intention of the man in the front, and you know, it can be dangerous. Alistair, the fleets that have to take the starting line in races like Admiral's Cup races, nowhere near this size, are they, or are they similar?
No, they're not. Much smaller in the Admiral's Cup races, because it's only teams from all the various countries competing, so they'll get well under the 100 yachts anyway.
Strath Gordon is still down on the HMOs Fremantle, of course, and ready for the start. Can you hear us, Strath?
Yes, indeed I can, Steve. I'm lucky too, though. I just survived the shock of the starting gun, and we're going to get it all over again in about another 7.5 minutes' time. I can see the jostling going already after the gun. David Salter is on Apollo. How are you finding the going, David?
Well, I'm working. That's what I'm doing. There's not as much breeze here as we thought initially. We're just going up to have a little squinch at the line, just to transit it. And we're a bit worried, I think, about visibility. I think Ben might have mentioned that. For a big boat like us, the helmsman can't see in the middle of the harbour like this. He just can't see with everyone on deck. And he depends on messages being relayed down from the front. And we'd hate to cut some little Tupperware boat in half on our way. But otherwise, we're pretty settled, I think. We got the number 3 up. We're thinking about the spinnaker, but in the meantime, we're going to tack. On, go.
Warwick Brookland's getting value for money out of our man, Mr. Salter. It's good to see, too. And quite sensational pictures, and that's what it's all about. And as he mentioned, they have got the mainsail reefed there, Ben. Yes, with Mr. Salter's microphone and on him like that, we probably will be able to hear his heartbeat after winding those coffee grinders. It's not easy.
It's pretty exciting stuff. These last few moments before the start are a real adrenaline rush.
Yes, you no doubt have memories, David, of last year, of a slight collision for you at the start.
That's right. A little Japanese boat, not so little, 50-footer, called Zero, came and hit us right on the stern quarter. They lost the protest afterwards, or in fact they withdrew their protest, but would have been sad to race all the way to Hobart and be blown by another boat.
Well, you're about 6 minutes away from the start. What's it like? Are you getting jostled by any of the others?
No, the afterguard, the tactical guys, are keeping us pretty clear. We're staying over on this far side of the harbour. The idea is, I think, that we'll flop twice more. We'll do 2 more little flip-flops, line ourselves up so that the spinnaker down the harbour isn't too tight. The whole problem, of course, is that we don't want to give ourselves too hard a spinnaker to hold down the Hobart, down the harbour, because not only might it drag us away from the heads, but it'll be very hard to drop.
Keep forward, John.
I think I can see Sid Fisher's boat down there too, to leeward of you. So if you thought this was a sport for the idle rich, you can see what hard work it is. It's
It's really a place for fit people.
I always call yachting a sport where the so-called idle rich, who aren't so idle, supply million-dollar toys for the poor people to play on.
Exactly a minute to go to the start. 1984 AWA Sydney to Hobart.
That's not a bad definition, Ben. There's hundreds of people aboard this fleet at the moment who would never get a chance to go yachting unless the owners wanted crews for their boats.
That's correct. The start looks fantastic now. The boats are all lined up with their, what we call their white and brown sails up, just fluttering on the line. And shortly, not long from now, about 30 seconds, the half the boats probably will blossom spinnakers, just like a flower garden bursting into bloom.
We'll have to watch with interest whether they can hold them.
There's one going up and coming down again.
10 seconds to go now. Spinnakers are starting to blossom.
And we're away. Up come the spinnakers, or they're trying. Certainly the smaller boats having a go at flying them. Just looking at that shot, I couldn't see if anyone was braking at the start. David, what sort of start have you made?
Well, we've made a bottom end start, the safe one. But I think we're going to go for this spinnaker. In the meantime, I'm going to pump up some boom vang because we need to keep the boom down flat to maximise our sail area. How's it going, mister?
So if you're going to lower the boom, you've got to keep your head a little bit lower, David.
It's a matter of just making sure the boom doesn't kick up at the end and twist and rob us of the effective area of the sail. It's a hydraulic thing. One of my little jobs.
You can see the trouble some of them are having holding those spinnakers full, but some are succeeding.
Well, you're going to see how we go this time.
And here goes Apollo's.
Somebody call the trim on the chute! Somebody call the trim on the chute! Backers! Backers! Trim on the chute!
The other Maxi, Steve, Condor and Ragamuffin haven't set spinnakers, and Apollo has. It's hard to tell from our angle who's in front.
That's Vengeance with the red hull there and the red spinnaker, and she's having trouble filling it.
She's got it filled now.
Quite magnificent sight. It's a spectator craft. Keeps to starboard of the fleet. That is a picture. 156 yachts, a record for a non-Southern Cross Cup year. And here they come. It's not hard to see why things get so choppy as we look head on at Apollo.
Lion New Zealand's got a red and white striped spinnaker up, setting quite nicely.
There's a shot from our powerboat as we pull back. David, that spinnaker seems to be holding up all right.
Yeah, it's holding okay. Whether we are is another matter. I think we will hold it, although we're going to be a bit low on South Reef.
It looks as though Ragamuffin's held off hoisting hers. She's coming up a little bit high at the moment.
Ragamuffin doesn't seem to have any intention of putting the spinnaker up because she doesn't have a spinnaker pole in position. But it looks from here that Apollo is in front of Ragamuffin.
Condor we can see now without a spinnaker, travelling along quite smoothly.
again there, no intention to put one up either.
In fact, Condor looks to be going pretty well the way she is at the moment.
Yeah, Condor was further up the starting line, more near the favoured end, but Apollo has crossed ahead of Ragamuffin, so the Spinnaker's probably doing Apollo a little bit of good.
Yeah, so that's Ragamuffin just to her stern. Just with the naked eye looking down towards the fleet, Condor looks to have the goods at this stage as far as getting out the heads first, and she's not flying the Spinnaker. Interesting decision there by Bob Bell. And the smaller yachts trailing. Some with Spinnakers, some without.
Well, Lion New Zealand has a Spinnaker up, but she didn't really get a very good start. She was back a little bit from the line at the start, and so we don't really get a good evaluation of her performance at the moment compared to the other boats.
There's Condor. David, if you can hear us now as you look across, does she look to be in front of you? Perhaps not have communication with Apollo just at the moment, but
They're probably worrying about taking down the Spinnaker.
yes.
Yeah.
There's the shot from the Channel 7 helicopter.
You can see a fairly mass small boat fleet there up on the left top of the screen. There's some really good racing. There's so many yachts in this race that is almost the same class. A lot of far boats. There should be some quite tight racing in that.
Apollo heeling well over.
Apollo's having a bit of a broach problem there with too much sail on.
Yeah, she's taking a wonky old course. Would I like to explain that term, Ben, about broach?
Well, Apollo's gone for broach. They're really pushing their boat. They're stuck every bit of sail up they can possibly hold, and the sail is overpowering the boat a little bit. Or, however, if they can control it, the boat will go a lot faster, and she is really ripping along. But unfortunately, Condor started further up the line and was in a little bit better position. And even though she may be going a bit slower, she's got slightly less distance to go, and she doesn't get into these wild, out-of-control situations like Apollo now broaching and flogging a Spinnaker. It's rather terrifying to be on these boats when that happens, because all that sail up there's like a circus tent flying around. Somebody's got to hold the other one corner of it with a sheet, and it can be a bit disconcerting.
This as we watch the two of them there, and Ragamuffin. Ragamuffin in view there, KA-70. She'd be third heading towards South Head at this stage. That's Apollo.
See, Apollo now has a job ahead of her to get that Spinnaker down and get the other sail chute in, whereas Condor and Ragamuffin only have to trim the sails they have. They're going to drop those big headsails. They're putting smaller headsails up inside the big one.
On the bottom of your screen there, you can see the rounding tug. They must go around that before turning right at the heads, as they say. And Condor, we can see as she travels straight past our commentary position now, is at least a boat length ahead and closer in to South Head. So in effect, she's got a bit of a break.
One of the boats that looks as though it's doing pretty well looks like Dr. Dan, which seems to be lying about fourth from the front at the moment, although a bit down to leeward. Very much smaller than the others and absolutely charging along there. And strangely enough, it looks as though Spirit of Queensland is giving the office a good run for its money.
So as we look at them there, it's Condor, Apollo, Ragamuffin. And they're pulling in that Spinnaker now on Apollo. Back to Vengeance with the red Spinnaker. And here's the shot from the tug, and Condor will be looking to come in as close as possible to the tug. We get a really nice shot from the tug in a moment, as indeed as it is Condor which
wins the race to the heads. And maybe another 630 nautical miles, but it means a lot to these crews to make a good start. And Condor, without Spinnaker, certainly done that. A lot of work going on the foredeck there, Ben.
Yeah, that's hard work up there. We call that Adventureland in the front, and down the back at Fantasyland.
Yes, there's Dr. Dan just on the screen now with Spirit of Queensland behind her.
Yeah, Dr. Dan did an excellent job there. This is quite a tiny boat compared to the other maxis, and there she is right in the middle of the maxi fleet.
Round comes Vengeance. Well, it took about 9.5 minutes. I think we might have a record. There's a freight train.
Looks as though somebody's trailing something behind them. Their freight train's got a dinghy attached to her or something.
Oh, yes. I don't know what that would be. I hope it's not one of the fellas falling over the side.
Shot from above, and now there's the spectator fleet virtually has a free go. You can see why the waters get so chopped up as they move ahead of the fleet. Apollo and Ragamuffin, you can see, and just ahead of them is Condor as they make their way out of Sydney Heads and their way south. We'll come back to check their progress after this short break.
Small boats will handle the conditions outside. See them handling the motorboat wash. It's going to get pretty wet for some of those boats as they go south now, coming around the tug.
It's Piccolo, Diamond Cutter.
As we get back more through the fleet, people get more relaxed. They're not as serious, and this is more of the cruising division coming now.
In amongst there was Parmelia, sail number 2344. She sailed out in the Parmelia race some years ago from the UK to Perth.
Back to the lead, though, and we're looking at Condor. Establishing a bit of a break.
You see Condor powering along there with a Kevlar sail, so space-age material that doesn't stretch, and just is almost essential on these very large yachts.
The curious thing about Condor sails, of course, is that Bob Bell was really sweating on them arriving. They only arrived in the last few days from overseas, and when they did, they were the wrong size. And Sid Fisher very kindly lent him his sail loft, and Condor recut those sails. Very sporting gesture by Sid. There you can see, even on the maxis, the spray coming over the bows. might leave the leaders for a moment and back to the rounding tug. Break, we'll come back in just a moment.
What's a welcome cry when you're feeling real beat? Hauling at the shell in the tropical heat. What's a welcome? And the cry goes out right across the state. Would you go and export, mate? Would you go and export, mate?
It's a pretty brief. What you mentioned before, Ben, some of these yachts, especially towards the back of the fleet, really only make the trip for the fun of it. They're not feeling that competitive.
Oh, that's true. They do make it for the fun of it, and a race like this must really make them think, why did we do this? Because a lot of them go down for the Hobart race is really an institution rather than a solid yacht race, and a lot of people go down there just for the institution. Now, I personally would rather go down by jet, but some of these people are more adventurous than I, and they really enjoy their Hobart race and look forward to it every year. And I say good luck to them, and they're the sort of people that make this race what it is.
Alistair, it's a tremendous learning experience for yachtsmen to go down on a Sydney to Hobart. Are most of the people who do make the trip well qualified to do so?
No, not most of them. In fact, far from most of them. On the bigger yachts, yes, the crews have all done it before and have a lot of ocean miles under their belts. But on the smaller yachts, they are required to have a minimum of 2 suitably qualified people on board, navigator, for instance, and a skipper. But the rest of the crew quite often will be doing it for the first time. Some young people, for instance, there's one boat, Punch, is in the race this year, and Barry Lewis, who owns the boat, has done it fairly often, but this time his wife's taking her down. He's doing the babysitting while she's away.
Right. Next year, when it's a Southern Cross Cup year, the Cruising Yacht Club's expecting a fleet. That's the site as the fleet makes it.
It was a vintage year for the Sydney to Hobart, 1975, and a new record number of entries. 102 yachts faced the starter.
The start.
It was International Women's Year, and the event attracted its first all-female crew. Vicky Willman led them on the 38-foot Barbarian. And it was the year when the weather smiled on the big yachts. 9 of them finished inside Helsol's previous record, and 6 of those inside of 3 days. Winds were light southeasterly early on Boxing Day and had shifted to the east for the start. Ballyhoo made the best of it and was first through the Sydney Heads. Windward Passage was in close pursuit down the coast, with Kealoha third. On the first night out, winds shifted to the northeast and spinnakers were set for a fast run. The nor'easter hit 20 knots the next day, with the duel for leadership narrowing to Windward Passage versus Kealoha. A high-pressure system directing the good downwind conditions continued to strengthen in the Tasman Sea. A cold front moving from the west further enhanced the northerly flow behind the high. It was a dream weather picture for the leading yachts, often topping speeds of 20 knots. Kealoha made the best of it down the Tasmanian coast and past Windward Passage. Jim Kilroy and his crew were across the line in Hobart at 2:36 a.m. on December the 29th. An enthusiastic crowd ignored the darkness to salute the fact that the previous record for the event was shattered by almost 11 hours. Windward Passage was there just 23 minutes later, and early leader Ballyhoo was only 2 hours behind. Kealoha's record is still the one to beat almost a decade later. It was 2 days, 14 hours, 36 minutes, and 56 seconds. And it just wouldn't have been possible without that ideal weather.
Well, is one of the Maxis who'll have a slightly more comfortable trip than most. Plenty of experience on board too. Welker. Yes, we have a look at some of the statistics of this yacht. Skipper, Bernie Lewis. And she's now getting on a bit, 6 years old. And and some experience there. 188 Hobarts between them, and line honours in 1981.
This is Cole Betts' Jubilee Hobart. I think he's done 24, and he wasn't going to do another one until he discovered this was his 25th, so he's got to do this one, and he's on board.
The crew sitting on the gunnel there. Ben, you might like to explain the weight distribution there. That sort of helps, doesn't it?
Yes, so if the boat doesn't heel over, of course, it goes faster, and the two things that stop the boat heeling over are the lead ballast in the keel and the weight, the live weight of the gear and equipment and crew on board. And on modern boats, the crew park themselves along the fence like that, like a whole lot of crows sitting on a fence, and it does make the boat more stable and make it go faster. In the old days, we used to all go off, watch and go to bed, but in some of the more competitive small boats, the crew sleep up on deck on the rail.
Ticket for the new year, happy new Holden. They're going for a song.
Only till January 20, save $1,000 on superseded Chimeras. Save on new Holden Astra. Unstoppable Gemini from just $7,250. Or get terrific savings on Holden Shuttle or Holden Jackaroo.
Happy new Holden. They're going for a song. Whichever's your style, we'll make it worth your while. See what you get for your old one. Happy new Holden.
Bruce Yardley. And the excitement of cricket. Like everybody else, he'll be off to celebrate after the game. But like everybody else, he knows the important thing is to get home safely.
Why risk your own life on the road and the lives of others after you've been drinking? Do the right thing. Appoint a skipper to drive you and your mates, or grab a cab. That way everybody's a winner, and I love winners.
Somebody once said that ocean racing was like standing under the shower tearing up $100 bills being hosed. Well, this race so far is giving people an insight into that. You can see the waves breaking over the bow of this little boat and spraying the crew, and it's not such a little boat, it's probably a 40-odd footer, and the sea makes it look quite small.
We think, we think that's Drake's Prayer, but we can't get too close a look at it because of the conditions. She's an interesting boat, only just completed, of course. And if we have a look at the statistics on her, Peter Kurtz's new boat, he's a man who knows his way south with Love and War previously, and once more, Dear Friends. Now, he only just managed to get it completed in time. But on the weekend, there were a couple of races, the AWA lead-up races, and Drake's Prayer went out in the first one and came fourth on corrected time behind Margaret Rintoul 4, and then the second one came home first. Now, that's a remarkable performance for a boat. Its first time out. They were hoisting sails they'd never even seen before. And she, along with Margaret Rintoul 4, must be favoured to do extremely well on corrected time in just a few moments. Strathgordon, on behalf of the rest of the crew, Ian Hurst, our director, hope you've enjoyed our coverage. Be watching the news tonight for an update, and then, of course, our nightly reports at 10:30. But until then, good afternoon to you, and please be with us tonight.